ever made a mistake, or somebody said something to you that was exposed, or absolutely anything that made you feel absolutely dreadful, and it consumed you for days and days, and as much as what you wanted to let it go, you just couldn't, then you most probably were experiencing shame. So in today's video, we're going to be going through what shame is, where it could possibly come from, and how to cope better with shame in the future. I'm Candice Bester from Grit, and thank you for watching another episode of our Grit Community Series. Today we're going to be speaking about that absolutely dreadful feeling of shame. To me, if I had to explain it in a meme, it would be a picture of me and then me trying to get my insides out of my body. It's the most uncomfortable feeling, and I just want it to go away. And I've since learned that it actually serves a purpose, as do all our feelings. And I've now learned how to deal better with it in the future. But remember, knowledge really is power. And so today I'd like to give you a little bit of knowledge on this subject. So first and foremost, what is shame? I'm just going to share the slide with you. Shame is a painful, debilitating emotion that arises from a deep sense of inadequacy, unworthiness, or unacceptability, often accompanied by feelings of guilt, self-loathing, and a belief that one is fundamentally flawed or defective. Shame is often distinguished from guilt, which focuses on a specific behavior or action, whereas shame attacks one's core identity and worth as a person. Shame is not the same as regret or remorse, which can be healthy and constructive. Shame can be overwhelming and harmful, but recognizing and working through it can lead to healing, growth, and a more compassionate relationship with oneself. So that's the difference between guilt and shame. Shame is a very, very deep core feeling, and it's not what I did, it's who I am. It's an identity that we create around our mistakes. And what often happens, what happens for me is when I go into a shame spiral, we'll get into that in a moment, but it really is the worst feeling for me in the world. So there's a whole lot of different frequencies that one experiences as a human. You want to experience the higher frequencies because that's when they speak about attracting all the things you want in your life. And one of the highest frequencies, and I'm sure you'll agree with me, is love. Like, it's one of the best feelings in the world, true, genuine love. But then on the absolute opposite scale of that, we get shame, and it's one of the lowest vibrational feelings that you can feel. It really is such a horrible feeling, that feeling of, I want the ground to swallow me up, I just want this to go away, but you just feel absolutely dreadful. So on our next slide, I want to speak about where could this shame possibly be coming from. So it could be coming from a dysfunctional family system. In other words, you grew up with parents that were maybe narcissists, or there was an alcoholic parent in the house, or anything to do with a toxic environment. If you were punished in public, if you were made fun of or laughed at some stage or as a child, if you were teased and bullied, if you endured harsh criticism, or you grew up with no room to make mistakes. So if any of this sounds familiar, yay, because it really means that you can start to understand where the shame is actually coming from. So how does it present itself is the next slide. So when you start speaking to yourself extremely negatively, so there's negative self-talk and a lot of self-criticism. When you feel embarrassed, humiliated, or like you're a disgrace, that is a signal that you're in shame. Okay, when you are believing that you are unworthy of love or acceptance or forgiveness, or you are having difficulty making eye contact and you start to hide yourself, you start to self-sabotage and you are showing self-destructive tendencies. Binging, so you go into a world of your own and you binge something, binge watch Netflix, binge eating, binge drinking, binge drugging. Any kind of binging is a good sign, or it's a big alarm bell that you're probably sitting in shame, or if you isolate or you hide yourself from the world. So what does it actually feel like? What are the actual physical feelings is our next slide. So it's a tightness in your chest or throat. It's very common. Or Brene Brown speaks about it as a whitewash. So it feels like your blood is being drained from your head into your body. Something happens and everything just drains, and it feels like you just want, like I said earlier, the ground to swallow you up. It often comes with a sense of nausea, weakness, or dizziness. So it is very much a physical feeling, and for me it is that flush of blood from your head to your feet. And when that happens, that is how I know that I am in shame. Okay, so I'd like to share with you a little personal story of how I learned about shame, one of the most shameful experiences that I had, in a real hope that you can see that nothing that we actually do should send us into this shame spiral. And so at the time I had only just started with Grit, and it was one of my first teacher training courses, and I had about 35 teachers in the room, and I did this activity with them where they had to read out loud 5 I am affirmations at the end of session 1. So it is, I am strong, I have what it takes, those kind of things. So again, I was a baby at it, and it only just started, and I got a little bit of resistance, and I kept pushing. Like I'd say, just on the other side of this, I know you're scared, but just on the other side of this, we just need to push through our fears. It really is liberating. And I went through the teachers and a little bit of resistance, but we kept going. And then finally, I think it was the second to last teacher who had to stand up. She was very, very young, fresh out of varsity. She stood up to read her I am affirmations, and literally her entire page shook like this. She burst out crying and read her I am affirmations and went to sit down. But that wasn't the worst of it. It was at that moment that another teacher stood up and said, "Candace, I think this is highly unfair what you just did to her. Not everybody is as confident as what you are." Well, if I could explain to you, I wanted to just pack up and run out of the room. I wanted the ground to swallow me up. The worst, most uncomfortable feeling entered my body. Anyway, on the way home that afternoon, I thought about it, I prayed about it, but I knew that the feeling was that intense that there was a huge gift in it for me. And then, as life would have it, one of the very first posts I came across was Brene Brown's. So Brene Brown, if you don't know, she's the same shame. She's the shame researcher. She's been studying shame for over 12 years, and she really is a guru in this field. And what I learned was 2 things in that moment. Number 1 was, she has a saying that says, if you are not in the arena getting your ass kicked, I'm not interested in your feedback. And for me, what that meant was, I was being brave, I was standing up, I was being vulnerable, and I made a mistake. And I stood up, and knowing that I am doing brave stuff, it really did help me. And often we are shamed for doing brave stuff. Like we have a great idea, somebody shoots our idea down. Or, we post a video on social media, so excited to share something with the world, and we get a negative comment. So it is brave to do these things, and when we are being brave, if we get negative feedback, we need to remember that we're being brave, and that is going to help us a lot through that. And the next thing that Brene Brown speaks about a lot is shame. If it was a science experiment, if it was put in a petri dish and it was exposed, it would die. In other words, if it is kept in secret, it breeds. Shame breeds in the dark, and it breeds in secrecy. So it made so much sense to me, because you're so embarrassed about what you've done that you hide away, you don't want to tell anyone, but it doesn't help. It makes it worse and worse and worse. So that was a huge, huge learning for me. Anyway, back to my story. The next day I had to go back to the same school. I didn't even have a week to recover. I had a new group of teachers I was doing, and the principal met me in the car park. So I was like, oh my goodness, here we go. and we still had COVID at the time, and she had a mask on, and she came to me and she was like, met me at my car, and she was like, Candace, I had one-on-one appraisals with the teachers today. And I was like, oh, can you just get it out, please? And she said, this teacher, and she named the teacher, she said that was the best thing anybody's ever done to her. And I was like, are you freaking kidding me? I still looked up at the heavens and I was like, really? And I was reminded that day, when you do the work and you get the learning and you can actually move past it, there's always an instant reward. And I was expecting to get literally fired. Like, our 70 teachers are pulling out. We're pulling out because of what you did. And I worked through the shame. And as hard as what it was, I forgave myself. I pitched up again, brave again. And instead of what I thought I was going to get, I got absolutely the opposite. So that to me, for me, I've never forgotten that story. It was such a gift disguised in poop. And from that day forward, I literally have learned that when I isolate, when I disappear, when I feel inadequate or feel like I'm not good enough or unloved, that I just talk to somebody. Find somebody that you trust and just tell them what you did. And then you're going to hear them say things like, oh, is that it? Oh my goodness, I've done something way worse. And then they're going to give you an example, and it's just going to put your mind at ease. You're going to realize I'm not a freak. I am normal. I'm absolutely loved and lovable and everything else that I'm not telling myself right now. Okay, so what should you do when you do find that you are in a shame spiral? So this is our last slide, and these are the tips. So grab a pen and paper and make some notes. So first of all, it's extremely important to acknowledge the feeling, to identify the feeling and to acknowledge it. And when you've done that, try to understand where it is coming from. So ask yourself, when did I feel like this in the past? You're going to have a previous memory pop up. Maybe you were teased at school and you remember a teacher shaming you, or a parent, or when you understand where it's coming from, it also helps a lot to deal with it, because you can realize it's not you, it's not now, it's past stuff. Tell somebody you trust, absolutely important, and do that as quickly as possible. Do that as quickly as possible so that you don't spiral. And then number 4 is to tell the truth about the situation. For me, it was, I am being brave. I was exposed. I did make a mistake. We all make mistakes. I need to make mistakes for me to learn. I learned so much from this. There's a blessing in here. Can you see how I told the truth about the situation versus all the shame stories I would have told myself instead? Number 5, extremely important, is to practice self-compassion. Just tell yourself, it's okay to make mistakes. You are loved. Everybody makes mistakes. And remember, treat yourself like somebody you'd love. Think about it. If your dearest, most precious family, friend, anybody came to you and told them that they'd done what you've done, how would you treat them? What would you say to them? And that's what you need to tell yourself. Nurture your inner child is so very important. Just close your eyes, go back to a previous memory of when you were little, and just see that gorgeous little face and say, I see you, I love you, you're okay, it's okay, you're safe, everything's going to be fine. And then lastly, please, and this is a big, big request, is to just create a life where you allow yourself to make mistakes and then to forgive yourself. It's such a big passion for me, for us as teachers and parents, to allow our kids to make mistakes. And the worst part is we tell them, if you make a mistake, it's not a mistake if you've learned from it. But then when they make a mistake, we punish them. And that to me is just absolutely crazy. So obviously they're not going to be okay with making mistakes because they don't want to be punished. So forgiving yourself and allowing yourself to make mistakes is really going to be the essence of this. So I really hope that something that I said today resonated. Please, we are relying on your likes and your shares. And I hope that these tools are something that you implement into your life, because every time you do, your life is just going to get easier and better.